The champagne flute slipped from my son-in-law's hand the moment he hit the floor. Ethan's father, Victor, was convulsing on my marble kitchen floor, foam forming at the corners of his mouth. And all I could think was, well, that wasn't supposed to happen to him. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Before I explain how I ended up in this nightmare, let me make one thing clear. I've lived 72 years, and I didn't survive the cutthroat world of real estate by being naive. When someone tries to poison you at your own retirement party, you notice, especially when that someone has been eyeing your bank account like a starving man stares at a feast just a couple of hours earlier. My kitchen had been full of laughter and celebration. I just sold my property management company for $24 million. Not bad for a business I'd built from scratch after my husband passed away 14 years ago. Lucas, my daughter, had insisted on throwing the party. Mom, you deserve this, she said, her deep green eyes filled with concern. Let Ethan handle everything. You just relax and enjoy. I should have realized something was off when Ethan volunteered to be the host. The man who usually complained about doing the dishes had suddenly become a perfect party planner. Arranging flowers and polishing crystal like his life depended on it, which, as it turned out, maybe it did. The party itself was wonderful. About 30 guests from my professional network, a few neighbors and family. Ethan had even hired a bartender. Nothing's too good for you, Dad, he said, clapping me on the shoulder with those perfectly manicured hands that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. I was making small talk with my former business partner when I saw it. Ethan, standing near the champagne table, glancing around nervously before pulling a small vial from his jacket pocket. My blood ran cold as I watched him empty the contents into a specific glass, the one with the tiny chip on the rim that I always used at parties. Now, a sensible person might have screamed, called the police, or confronted him right there. But I've learned that sometimes the best way to catch a snake is to let it think it's cornered a mouse. So I smiled, nodded at whatever my business partner was saying about market trends, and kept watching. Ethan picked up my doctor-recommended champagne and began walking toward me, his face a mask of son-in-law concern. Mom, you look tired, he said, offering me the glass. Here, have some champagne. You've earned it. I took the glass, thanked him warmly, and waited. About 10 minutes later, when he was distracted showing off his new designer watch to the neighbors, I quietly switched glasses with his father, Victor, who was standing nearby, looking a little lost without a drink. Victor had always been a bit absent-minded. Poor man. He grabbed the nearest glass without thinking, the one I had just placed next to his coat. Within 5 minutes, he was complimenting the champagne's interesting flavor and asking if I had ordered it from somewhere special. The rest, as they say, happened very quickly. I knelt beside Victor while Ethan screamed for someone to call 911. His performance of shock devastation was almost convincing. Almost. The problem with being the target of murder, or rather, being aware of attempted murder, is that genuine panic and fake panic look very different when you know what to watch for. What happened? My son Lucas demanded, pushing through the small crowd that had gathered. His face was pale, but I caught something else in his expression, a fleeting glance toward Ethan that lasted just a fraction too long. I don't know. Ethan was sobbing, clutching my arm. He'd just collapsed. 1 minute he was fine, the next, gesturing helplessly at his father Victor, who was now unconscious but still breathing. Thank God, the paramedics arrived within minutes. As they worked on Victor, loading him onto a stretcher, I found myself studying my daughter's face. 32 years of motherhood had taught me to read her moods like weather patterns. Right now, she looked like a woman watching her carefully laid plans crumble in real time. Which hospital? I asked the lead paramedic. St. Catherine's. Are you family? Close friend? I said, glancing meaningfully at Ethan, who was too busy hyperventilating to notice. I'll follow in my car. Lucas stepped forward quickly. Mom, you don't need to do that. We'll handle everything. You should stay here. Clean up from the party. How thoughtful. Keep the target at home while they figured out what went wrong with their little scheme. Nonsense, I said firmly. Victor is practically family. I'm coming. I grabbed my purse and keys before anyone could argue. At the hospital, I made sure to stay close enough to overhear the medical staff's conversations. Victor's condition was listed as acute poisoning, cause unknown. The doctor mentioned something about planned alkaloids to the nurse, specific enough to make me think someone had done their homework on untraceable toxins. Ethan paced the waiting room, his designer shoes clicking against the linoleum like a metronome, counting down his anxiety. Lucas sat rigidly in a plastic chair, his phone buzzing constantly with messages. He seemed reluctant to answer. This is just terrible, Ethan said for the 5th time. Poor Dad, I can't understand how this happened. I patted his shoulder sympathetically. These things are often mysterious, dear. I'm sure the doctors will figure it out. Then I added, almost casually, it's lucky he didn't drink much of that champagne. He only had a few sips before he collapsed. Ethan's step faltered almost imperceptibly. Champagne? You think the champagne caused this? Oh, I'm sure it's nothing, I said with a dismissive wave. Just an old woman's mind looking for patterns where there aren't any. But Ethan's face had gone a shade paler, and his hands were trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee. Lucas was watching our conversation with the intensity of a hawk studying field mice. 3 hours later, a doctor emerged to tell us Victor was stable but would need to stay overnight for observation. The tests were inconclusive, he said. But whatever he'd ingested was slowly working its way out of his system. Can we see him? Ethan asked. Family only, and he's sedated. That's to come back tomorrow. As we left the hospital, Lucas walked me to my car. Mom, maybe you should stay with us tonight. After what happened, I feel better if you weren't alone. How considerate. Especially since Victor's little medical emergency had probably left them wondering if I suspected anything. The answer was yes. Absolutely I did. But they didn't need to know that yet. That's sweet of you, dear. But I'll be fine. I have that new security system, remember? I kissed his cheek and got into my car, watching in my rearview mirror as he and Ethan had what looked like an urgent whispered conversation in the parking lot. Back home, I poured myself a real glass of champagne from a fresh bottle naturally and settled into my study. Time to figure out exactly what my loving family had planned for me and, more importantly, what I was going to do about it. I spent the night doing something I'd become quite good at in 45 years of business research. Not the kind you do with computers and databases. The kind you do with a clear memory and a suspicious mind. Victor's poisoning wasn't random, and it certainly wasn't an accident. Someone had planned to kill me at my own party, probably hoping to make it look like a heart attack or a stroke. At 72, those things happen. No one questions a successful woman's heart giving out from the stress of selling her life's work. But why? That was the $24 million question, wasn't it? I made coffee at 5 in the morning and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down everything I knew about Lucas and Ethan's financial situation. It wasn't pretty. Lucas's architectural firm had been struggling since the last market slump, and Ethan's custom watch business was more hobby than profit center. They lived well too well for their actual income. Their mortgage on that oversized Westfield house was 3 times what they could reasonably afford. The BMW and Audi in the driveway weren't fully paid off. Ethan's shopping habits alone could fund a small country's education budget. I'd help them, of course. What mother wouldn't? A few thousand here and there when Lucas mentioned they were tight some months. The down payment on the house when Ethan cried about wanting to start a family in the right neighborhood. Private School tuition for Emma when they insisted public schools weren't good enough. Looking at my checkbook records, I realized I'd given them nearly $200,000 over the past 5 years. Gifts. I'd call them investments in their happiness, never loans. That would have been tacky. But now I wondered if they seen those gifts differently. Less like motherly generosity, more like advance payments on an inheritance. They couldn't wait to collect. The phone rang at 7:30 a.m. It was Ethan, calling to check on me. Mom, I couldn't sleep all night thinking about you, he said, voice heavy with concern. After what happened to Dad? I just worry that maybe there was something wrong with the food or drinks. You didn't feel sick at all, did you? How thoughtful of him to check whether his poison had hit its intended target. Not at all, dear. I feel fine. Have you heard anything more about Victor? The doctors say he should be able to go home today. They think maybe he ate something that disagreed with him before the party. You know how he is with his medications. Probably took something on an empty stomach. Victor Langford was many things, but careless with medication wasn't one of them. The man organized his pills like a military operation, complete with label containers and smartphone reminders. That's such a relief, I said. I was worried it might have been something at the party. That would have been terrible. Oh, no. Definitely not, Ethan said quickly. The doctors were very clear it wasn't food poisoning. Just one of those things. Interesting how quickly he wanted to shut down any investigation into what happened at my house. Almost as if he was worried someone might test the remaining champagne. After hanging up, I walked to my kitchen and looked at the bottle Ethan had opened for the party, still 3/4 full, sitting innocently on my counter. I wondered what would happen if I had it tested at a lab. Not that I needed proof for myself. I knew what I'd seen. But evidence might be useful later. My doorbell rang at 9 a.m. Lucas stood on my front porch holding a box of pastries from my favorite bakery. Looking every inch the concerned son. Thought you might want some breakfast, he said, kissing my cheek. You probably didn't eat much yesterday after everything that happened. I let him in and made fresh coffee while he arranged the pastries on a plate. Watching him move around my kitchen, opening cupboards he'd known since childhood, reaching for sugar without asking where it was kept, I felt a strange sadness. This was still my little boy, the one who used to bring me dandelions, and proudly display his elementary school artwork on my refrigerator. When had that boy turned into a man who stood by while his wife tried to murder his mother? How are you holding up, Mom? He asked, settling across from me at the breakfast table. Oh, you know me. Takes more than a little excitement to rattle these old bones. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's what I was afraid of. I sipped my coffee and waited. The thing is, Lucas continued, picking at a Danish. Ethan and I have been talking about your situation. My situation? You're 72 years old, Mom. Living alone in this big house, all that money from the sale. He gestured vaguely. It just seems like a lot for one person to manage. There it was. The setup for whatever they had planned next. I appreciate your concern, dear, I said, keeping my voice light. But I've been managing quite well so far. Lucas leaned forward, his expression earnest. Have you though? I mean, yesterday's accident with Victor, what if that had been you? What if you'd collapsed and no one found you for hours? The audacity was breathtaking. He was using their failed murder attempt as an argument for why I needed their protection. Lucas, Victor collapsed at a party with 30 witnesses, and paramedics arrived in minutes. I'd hardly call that a cautionary tale about living alone. That's not what I meant. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his teenage years when he was about to ask for something he knew I'd refuse. Look, Ethan and I have been doing some research. There are some really nice communities for active seniors, places where you'd have people around, activities, Medical staff on site. Ah, the nursing home pitch. How convenient that they'd already been researching options for me. How thoughtful, I said. And I suppose you found something specific in mind? Actually, yes. He pulled out his phone and showed me a glossy website. Sunset Grove. It's only 20 minutes from our house, so we could visit all the time. They have a golf course, a spa, cultural activities. It's more like a resort than a retirement home. I studied the pictures of smiling elderly people playing bridge and doing water aerobics. Everyone looked so peaceful and content, probably because they were heavily medicated. The only thing is, Lucas continued, there's usually a waiting list. But if someone wanted to move in quickly, they need to pay the full entrance fee up front. It's significant, about $400,000, but it covers everything. Housing, meals, medical care for life. $400,000. That would make a nice dent in my liquid assets, wouldn't it? And once I was safely tucked away in Sunset Grove, who would have power of attorney over the remaining $22 million? Who would be making decisions about my care and my money? It sounds lovely, I said. But you know, I'm quite happy here. This house holds so many memories of your father. Mom, Dad's been gone 15 years. Don't you think it's time to start a new chapter? The gentle concern in his voice made my heart ache. If I hadn't seen what I seen last night, I might have actually considered his suggestion. My son worried about his aging mother, wanting to make sure she was safe and cared for. It would have been touching. Instead, it was terrifying. I'll think about it, I said finally. It's a big decision. Lucas's relief was visible. Of course. Take all the time you need. Maybe we could drive out there next week just to look around. Maybe. I stood up and began clearing the breakfast dishes. You know, I should call Victor today. Make sure he's feeling better. Actually, Mom, Lucas said, Evelyn asked me to tell you that Victor probably needs to rest for a few days. The doctor said visitors might be too stimulating while he recovers. How convenient. Keep me away from the victim until the evidence is out of his system, and he can't remember details clearly. After Lucas left, I sat in my study and thought about timing. They'd waited until after I sold the company to make their move. Smart. If I died 6 months ago, my $23 million would have gone to Lucas in my will anyway. But as a gift from a living person, it would face different tax implications. Killing me now, especially if they could manufacture signs of declining mental capacity first, would give them grounds to challenge any recent changes to my estate plans. The phone rang. My attorney, Adrian Cole, returning a call I'd made earlier. Marian, good to hear from you. How was the retirement party? Eventful, I said. Adrian, I need to see you soon. Is everything all right? I looked out my study window at the garden my husband had planted 20 years ago. The roses were blooming beautifully, despite having no one to tend them but an old woman who apparently couldn't be trusted to manage her own life. I'm not sure, I said. But I think I'm about to find out. Adrian Cole had been my attorney for 20 years, which meant he's seen me through my husband's death, the building of my business, and every major decision since. A thin, precise man who kept his emotions carefully controlled. Adrian was exactly the kind of lawyer you wanted when you suspected your family was trying to kill you. His office overlooked downtown from the 15th floor. All dark wood and leather chairs designed to inspire confidence. I'd always felt safe here, surrounded by law books and a subtle smell of expensive cologne. Tell me everything, Adrian said after his secretary brought us coffee and closed the door. I told him every detail from the party. Victor's collapse. Lucas's visit this morning. Adrian listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. You're certain about what you saw? He asked when I finished. As certain as I am that I'm sitting in this chair. Adrian leaned back, tapping his pen against his lips. The problem is proving intent. Evelyn could claim she was adding something harmless to the champagne, a supplement, a flavoring, something personal. Without testing the remaining champagne, we have no evidence of attempted murder. Then let's test it. If we find poison, we have proof she attempted to kill someone. But we still can't prove she intended to kill you specifically. She could claim she was targeting her own father for insurance money or that it was meant for someone else entirely. I hadn't considered that angle. Even with proof of poisoning, they could wriggle out of a murder charge. Attempted murder, yes, but not premeditated homicide. Marion, Adrian said, his expression growing serious. There's something else we need to discuss. If they're willing to kill you for your money, they might try other approaches first. Legal challenges to your competency, for instance. On what grounds? Your age. Living alone. The stress of selling your company. If they can establish a pattern of declining judgment or mental capacity, they could petition for guardianship. Once they control your person, they control your assets. The nursing home suggestion suddenly snapped into focus. Get me isolated. Surrounded by medical professionals who might be willing to document signs of confusion or dementia, especially if those professionals were being paid well for their observations. What do I need to do? Adrian opened a file drawer and pulled out a thick folder. First, we document your current mental state. I'll arrange for you to be evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist, someone who specializes in competency assessments for high-value clients. Get that on record immediately. And then, he smiled, a flash of sharp white teeth. Then we get creative with your estate planning. For the next 2 hours we went over options, trust structures that would make it nearly impossible for anyone to challenge my decisions. Medical directives that specified exactly who could and couldn't make healthcare choices on my behalf. Financial arrangements that would trigger automatic audits if anyone attempted to access my accounts without proper authorization. As I prepared to leave, Adrian said one last thing. Given what you've told me about last night, I think you should consider your personal safety. If they tried once, they'll try again, probably more carefully next time. I thought about Daniel's suggestion that I stay with them last night. How convenient that would have been. A grieving widow, distraught over a friend's sudden illness. Perhaps taking a sedative to help her sleep. So easy for an elderly woman to accidentally take too many pills. What do you recommend? I'd asked Adrian earlier. Security cameras for starters. Motion sensors. A panic button system. I can recommend a firm that specializes in high net worth protection. High net worth protection. That's what I apparently needed now. Rich enough to kill for. Driving home, I found myself studying every car in my rearview mirror, wondering if I was being followed. Paranoia, probably. But, as my late husband used to say, you're not paranoid if they're actually after you. My phone rang just as I pulled into my garage. Jessica, her voice bright with artificial cheer. Marion? I just wanted to let you know my dad's home from the hospital. He's feeling much better, though he doesn't remember much about last night. The doctor said that's normal with this kind of incident. How perfectly convenient. I'm so glad he's all right, I said. I'd love to visit tomorrow. Oh, he's really not up for visitors yet. Maybe in a few days. I'll let you know. Of course, dear. Just tell him I'm thinking of him. After hanging up, I sat in my car for a long moment, looking at the house I called home for 30 years. My husband and I had bought it when Daniel was 10, full of dreams about family dinners and holiday gatherings. The mortgage had been a stretch then, but we'd been young and optimistic, certain everything would work out. Now it felt like a fortress under siege. But I'd been in business long enough to know that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Time to show my family what a 70-year-old woman was really capable of. The security company arrived at 8 the next morning. 3 technicians in unmarked vans who spent the day installing cameras. motion detectors, and a panic button system that could summon police in under 3 minutes. I told the neighbors I'd been having problems with package theft, a believable enough story in any suburban neighborhood. By afternoon, my house was better protected than most jewelry stores. But the real security came from the envelope Adrian's messenger delivered at 2:00. My updated will, trust documents, and medical directives all properly witnessed and notarized. If Lucas and Evelyn wanted my money, they'd have to wait for it, and they did get a lot less than they expected. The new will cut Lucas's inheritance from everything to a modest trust fund that would pay him $50,000 a year for life. Enough to live comfortably, but not enough to fund their current lifestyle. The bulk of my estate would go to cancer research, with smaller amounts to several charities I supported over the years. As for Evelyn, she got nothing. Not a penny. I never liked the woman, but I tolerated her for Lucas's sake. Attempted murder, however, was where I drew the line. I was reading through the documents one final time when my doorbell rang. Through the security monitor, I could see Lucas and Evelyn standing on my front porch, both looking somewhat grim. "Mom, we need to talk," Lucas said when I opened the door. "Of course, dear. Come in." They settled in my living room. Evelyn perched on the edge of the sofa like she might need to run at any moment. Lucas looked around the room, his gaze lingering on the new security camera in the corner. "New camera?" he asked. "Package theft," I said smoothly. "You can't be too careful these days." Evelyn cleared her throat. "Marian, we've been thinking about what happened the other night with Dad's accident. Yes? Well, it's just that we feel terrible about having the party here. If something we brought caused him to get sick." She trailed off, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I watched this performance with professional appreciation. Evelyn had clearly been practicing. "I'm sure it wasn't anything you brought, dear." "But what if it was?" Lucas leaned forward. "What if there was something wrong with the champagne or the food? Or, Mom, I never forgive myself if we'd accidentally put you in danger." Here came the setup for whatever they planned next. "The point is," Evelyn said, "we think it might be better if we took care of you for a while. Just until we're sure you're safe." "Took care of me? How?" "Well, you could stay with us," Lucas said. "Just temporarily. Until we figure out what happened the other night." I let the silence stretch, watching their faces. Lucas looked genuinely worried. He'd always been good at convincing himself his motivations were pure. Evelyn looked like a woman whose mortgage payment was overdue. "That's very thoughtful," I said finally. "But I'm perfectly safe here." "Are you, though?" Evelyn's voice took on an edge. "You're 72 years old, Marian, living alone. What if something happens and no one finds you for days?" The same argument Lucas had made yesterday. They were working from a script. "What if you have a fall?" Lucas added. "Or a heart attack?" "Mom, at your age, anything could happen." At my age, as if 72 meant I was already dead and just hadn't noticed yet, you know? I said thoughtfully, "You're absolutely right. Anything could happen at my age." That's exactly why I spent the day updating my will. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. "Your will?" Evelyn's voice was carefully neutral. "Oh yes. It's amazing how a brush with mortality, even someone else's, makes you think about these things." I realized my old will was terribly out of date. Lucas's face had gone pale. "What kind of updates?" I smiled at him. The same smile I'd used when he was 8, and I caught him lying about breaking my favorite vase. "Oh, just some minor adjustments to reflect my current priorities. You know how these things go." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear their minds racing, trying to figure out how badly their plans had just been disrupted. "Well," Evelyn said finally, her voice tight, "I'm sure whatever you decided was for the best." "I think so, too, dear." They left shortly after, promising to check on me soon. I watched from my security monitor as they sat in their car in my driveway for 10 minutes, having what looked like a very intense conversation. Then Evelyn made a phone call. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see her gesturing angrily. Lucas kept trying to take the phone away from her, and she kept pushing his hand aside. When they finally drove away, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into my favorite chair. Tomorrow I would implement phase 2 of my plan. But tonight, I was going to enjoy the first peaceful evening I'd had in days. After all, there's something deeply satisfying about watching your enemies realize they've underestimated you. The game was just beginning. And I'd been playing it a lot longer than they had. The next morning brought a visitor. I wasn't expecting. Helen Price stood on my doorstep looking pale but determined, clutching a small purse like a lifeline. Marian, I need to talk to you, she said without preamble. It's about the other night. I invited her in and made tea, studying her face for signs of the poisoning. She looked tired but alert, certainly more coherent than her daughter would have liked me to believe. Evelyn told me I had some kind of reaction to medication, Helen said, settling into my living room chair. But Marian, I don't take any medications except vitamins. Haven't for years. Interesting. What do you remember about the party? Everything. Until I started feeling dizzy. I remember the champagne tasting strange bitter, almost metallic, and I remember seeing Evelyn near the drinks table earlier, doing something with a small bottle. My pulse quickened. What kind of bottle? Like an eyedropper bottle. The kind you'd use for essential oils. Or other things. Helen's hands shook slightly as she set down her teacup. Marian, I think my daughter tried to poison you. Why would you think that? Helen's laugh was bitter. Because she's been talking about your money for months. How unfair it is that you have so much and they struggle, Helen said, her voice trembling. How much easier their lives would be if something happened to you. The pieces were sliding into place. Has she said anything specific? I asked. Last month, Helen replied. Evelyn asked if I thought you'd updated your will recently. She seemed very interested in Lucas's inheritance. Helen met my eyes. Marian, I think they've been planning this for a while. I made a decision. Helen deserved to know what her daughter had tried to do, and I needed an ally who'd witnessed their behavior firsthand. Helen, I saw Evelyn put something in my champagne glass, I told her. I watched the color drain from her face. She tried to kill you, and I almost died instead. We sat in stunned silence for a moment, the magnitude of it all settling between us. What are you going to do? Helen asked finally. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, I said. Helen raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means your daughter and my son are about to learn that some games have higher stakes than they realized. After Helen left, I made one phone call. Patricia Williams ran a private investigation firm that specialized in corporate espionage and deep background work. We used her on delicate matters over the years. Patricia, it's Marian Wilson, I said when she answered. Her voice was warm. I heard about the sale. Congratulations. Thank you, I replied bluntly. I need a favor. A personal one. What kind of favor? She asked. I need everything you can find on my son's and Evelyn's finances. Bank accounts, credit cards, loans, investments, everything. There was a pause on the line. Marian, are you sure? Sometimes family information can be uncomfortable. I'm sure, I said. Give me 48 hours, Patricia promised. While Patricia worked her magic, I set the next phase of my plan in motion. I called Lucas and asked him to meet me for lunch at our old favorite restaurant, the place where we'd celebrated his architecture school graduation, his wedding, and Samantha's birth. He arrived looking nervous, constantly checking his phone. How are you feeling, Mom? You sounded upset when you called. I've been thinking about what you and Evelyn said. About my safety, about planning for the future. His face brightened. And I think you're right. I think it's time to make some changes. Lucas leaned forward eagerly. What kind of changes? Well, I said, keeping my tone casual. I've been looking into Sunset Manor, the place you mentioned. I called them this morning. That's wonderful, Mom. I think you'll really like it there. They do have an opening, but it needs to be filled quickly. Someone else is interested in the same unit. How quickly? Next week. I need to pay the entrance fee by Friday to secure it. Lucas's excitement was palpable. That's not a problem, is it? You have the money from the sale. Of course I do. It's just... I let the hesitation hang in the air. Well, it's a big step. I thought maybe you and Evelyn could help me with the paperwork. Make sure I'm making the right decision. Absolutely. We'd be happy to help. I smiled at my son, memorizing his face. In a few days, that eager expression would change to something very different. There's just one thing, I added casually. The facility requires all residents to have a power of attorney on file. Someone to make decisions if they become unable to. I was hoping you'd be willing to take that on. Of course, Mom, whatever you need. Perfect. Lucas thought he was maneuvering me into giving him control of my money. Instead, he was walking directly into my trap. Thursday morning, Patricia called with her report. I listened in growing amazement as she detailed Lucas and Evelyn's financial situation. It was worse than I'd imagined. They were leveraged to the hilt. Patricia explained that the house had been refinanced 3 times. They had 2 mortgages, plus a maxed-out home equity line of credit. Credit card debt exceeding $80,000. How have they been making payments? I asked Patricia. Barely. Lucas's architectural firm has been operating at a loss for 2 years. They've been using credit cards to pay other credit cards, classic signs of financial desperation. Anything else? Evelyn took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. $500,000, with her listed as the beneficiary. My blood turned to ice. How is that legal? She claimed insurable interest as your daughter-in-law and caregiver. The insurance company probably assumed Lucas was the actual beneficiary and Evelyn was just handling the paperwork. A life insurance policy. They've been planning my death for months, not days. There's one more thing, Marion. Lucas has been making regular payments to someone named Dr. Richard Steinberg, a geriatric psychiatrist. For what? I'm not sure yet, but the payment started 3 months ago. Small amounts consultation fees. Dr. Richard Steinberg. I made a note to ask David about him that afternoon. Lucas and Evelyn arrived at my house with a briefcase full of paperwork for Sunset Manor. They spread the documents across my dining room, table like generals planning a battle. This is the admission contract. Evelyn explained, pointing to a thick stack of papers. And this is the financial disclosure form. It lists all your assets so they can calculate your monthly fees. It's very thorough, I observed, scanning the documents. They'd want access to all my accounts, all my investments, everything. The power of attorney paperwork is here, Lucas added, sliding another document toward me. It's pretty standard. Just gives me the authority to handle your financial affairs if you can't. I read through the power of attorney document carefully. It was far more comprehensive than Lucas had indicated. With this signature, he'd have immediate access to my bank accounts, investment portfolios, and the authority to make any financial decisions on my behalf. This seems quite broad, I said. Do I really need to give you this much authority? Mom, it's just a precaution, Lucas said. The facility requires it. And honestly, at your age, it's good to have someone younger handling the complicated financial stuff. At my age. There was that phrase again. What if I change my mind about Sunset Manor? I asked, sliding the papers into a neat stack. Can this be revoked? Lucas and Evelyn exchanged a quick glance. Well, technically yes. Evelyn said carefully, but the facility has strict policies about residents who try to leave. There are medical evaluations, waiting periods. It's complicated. Of course, it was. Once I signed these papers and moved to Sunset Manor, they control my money and could make it very difficult for me to leave, especially if Dr. Richard Steinberg was standing by. To evaluate my mental competency, I need to think about this overnight, I said. Gathering the papers. It's a big decision. Lucas's face fell. Mom, remember we need to submit everything by tomorrow if you want the unit. I understand. I'll have an answer for you in the morning. After they left, I called David Hartwell. David, what can you tell me about Dr. Richard Steinberg? Steinberg? He's a geriatric psychiatrist. Specializes in competency evaluations for elderly patients. Why? My son's been paying him for consultations. There was a long pause. Marian. Steinberg has a reputation for being accommodating to families who are concerned about an elderly relative's judgment. His evaluations tend to support whatever outcome the family is seeking. You mean he's willing to declare people incompetent for money? I couldn't say that officially, David replied. But I've seen several cases where families use Steinberg's evaluations to gain control of an elderly person's assets. The picture was becoming crystal clear. Lucas and Evelyn weren't just after my money, they developed a comprehensive plan to take it. Get me into Sunset Manor under the guise of safety and care. Use the power of attorney to access my accounts. If I resisted or tried to leave, they'd have Dr. Steinberg declare me mentally incompetent. It was disturbingly clever. If I hadn't seen Evelyn slip something into the champagne, I might have walked right into their trap. David, I said into the phone, I need you to prepare something for me. And I need it ready by tomorrow morning. What kind of something? He asked. The kind that's going to teach my family a lesson they'll never forget. That evening I sat in my study, running the plan through my head one last time. Every move had to be flawless. Tomorrow, Lucas and Evelyn would get exactly what they deserved. But first there was one more call to make. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes everything seem ominous, and perfect for what I had arranged. Lucas and Evelyn arrived at 9 on the dot, dressed like they were heading into a boardroom meeting, which, in a way, they were. Have you decided, Mom? Lucas asked, settling into my living room with barely contained excitement. I have. I produced the Sunset Grove paperwork, signed and notarized. I think you were right. It's time to start a new chapter. Evelyn's relief was immediate. Oh, Marian, I'm so glad. You're going to love it there. And Lucas, I said, I've signed the power of attorney papers as well. Lucas's hands actually trembled as he took the documents. This is the right decision, Mom. You won't regret it. I smiled. I'm sure I won't. We spent the next hour going through the financial forms. Evelyn had her laptop open, fingers flying as I read account numbers and access codes aloud. Every few minutes she and Lucas exchanged glances, the sort of private, thrill looks people give when a longed-for windfall finally arrives. There's just one more thing, I said when we'd finished. I need to sign some additional paperwork with my attorney before the transfer is official. Something about tax implications for large transfers. Of course, Lucas said. Do you want us to drive you to his office? Actually, I told them, folding the papers neatly, he's coming here. David should arrive any moment. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. But it wasn't David Hartwell standing on my porch. It was Detective Lisa Morrison from the local police department, accompanied by a colleague I didn't recognize. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Detective Morrison. We need to speak with you about an incident that occurred at your home earlier this week. Lucas jumped to his feet. What kind of incident? A suspected poisoning, Detective Morrison said, her gaze shifting between Lucas and Evelyn. We understand there was a medical emergency during a party. Evelyn's face drained of color. That was my mother. She had a reaction to her medication. The doctor said it wasn't serious. Actually, Mrs. Wilson, that's not what the hospital reported. Detective Morrison opened a notebook. The toxicology results show your mother ingested a concentrated amount of oleander extract. That is not a medication, it's a deadly poison. The silence in the living room was suffocating. We also had the remaining champagne from that evening tested. The detective continued. The bottle opened for the party contained the same oleander extract. Someone deliberately poisoned that champagne. Lucas stared at Evelyn, horror dawning across his face. Evelyn. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Evelyn's voice shrilled, panic rising. This is crazy. Why would I poison my own mother? That's what we're trying to figure out, Detective Morrison said, her tone measured but firm. Especially since the champagne glass with the highest concentration of poison was originally intended for Mrs. Wilson here. Evelyn looked like she might collapse. Lucas sank back into his chair, pale as ash. There's something else, I said quietly. Detective, show them the insurance policy. Detective Morrison nodded and produced another document. Mrs. Hartwell, we discovered you took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Mrs. Wilson 6 months ago. That provides a clear financial motive. This is insane, Evelyn whispered, her composure shattered. Marian, tell them this is insane. Evelyn's voice cracked, her eyes darting wildly. I looked at my daughter-in-law, this woman who had smiled at me, brought me tea, pretended to care about my health while plotting my death. I saw you put the poison in my champagne glass. Evelyn, I said, my voice steady. I switched our drinks deliberately. Lucas's head snapped up. You knew? You knew she was trying to poison you? I've known for days, I replied. I also know about your financial situation, about Dr. Steinberg, about your plan to have me declared incompetent. I know about everything. The power of attorney papers slipped from Lucas's numb fingers. Mom, I didn't know about the poison. I swear to God, I didn't know she was going to try to kill you. But you knew about the rest of it, didn't you? I said softly. The nursing home. The power of attorney. The plan to take my money. Lucas's silence was answer enough. Detective Morrison stepped forward. Evelyn Hartwell. You're under arrest for attempted murder. As they handcuffed her, Evelyn turned to me. Her eyes full of hatred. You think you're so clever, don't you? You have no idea what you've done. Actually, I said, my voice like ice. I know exactly what I've done. After the police left with Evelyn, Lucas sat in my living room like a man in shock. He stared at the scattered power of attorney papers, occasionally running his hands through his hair. She said it was just about getting you somewhere safe, he said finally, his voice breaking. She said you were becoming forgetful, making poor decisions. She convinced me you needed protection, and the money. The money was about protection too. Lucas's face crumpled. We're in so much debt, Mom. The business is failing. We're behind on everything. Evelyn said if something happened to you naturally, we'd inherit enough to start over. But she never said anything about, he gestured helplessly, about murder. I thought we were just planning for the inevitable. Getting things in place for when when you died of natural causes. How convenient, I said quietly, that those natural causes needed a little help arriving. Lucas looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. I never wanted to hurt you. I studied my son's face, searching for the truth beneath the remorse. Part of me wanted to believe him, to think Evelyn had manipulated him into this mess. But I'd been in business too long to ignore red flags. Lucas, I said, show me your phone. What? Your phone. Show me your text messages with Evelyn from the past week. Lucas hesitated, then slowly handed it over. I scrolled through his messages, my heart sinking with each exchange. Evelyn, did you talk to your mom about Maplewood Estates? Lucas, yes. She's considering it. Evelyn, good. The sooner we get her moved, the better. She's been asking too many questions about our finances. Lucas, what if she changes her mind? Evelyn, she won't. Not after tomorrow night. Lucas, what's tomorrow night? Evelyn, trust me. By Sunday, she'll be begging us to take care of her. I handed the phone back to him, my hand trembling slightly. You knew, didn't you? I asked softly. Maybe not the exact method, but you knew Evelyn was planning something for the night of the party. Lucas's shoulders sagged. I thought she meant to scare you somehow. Stage a break-in maybe. Or some kind of accident that would make you realize you weren't safe living alone. You thought she was going to stage my attempted murder. Not murder, he said quickly, the words tumbling out. Just something that would convince you to move to Maplewood Estates willingly. The casual way he said it chilled me to the bone. My own son had been comfortable with the idea of traumatizing me into compliance. Lucas, there's something else you need to know, I said quietly. I had a private investigator look into your finances. His face went white. What did you find? Everything, I said. The debt. The failed business. The fact that you've been living beyond your means for years. I slid Patricia's report across the table, my finger tapping one entry over and over. There's something here that particularly interests me, I said evenly. The payments to Dr. Steinberg. Lucas's eyes darted to the page. Mom, I can explain, can you? My voice was ice. Because, according to this, you've been paying him to consult on my case for 3 months. That's before you ever mentioned Maplewood Estates. Before you expressed any concern about my mental state. What exactly were you consulting him about, Lucas? Lucas buried his face in his hands. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence, brittle and cold. We needed a backup plan in case you refused to sign the power of attorney willingly. A backup plan. Steinberg agreed to evaluate you, Lucas whispered. He would. Find signs of dementia or incompetency. Evelyn said it was just a precaution in case you became difficult. I felt something cold settle deep in my chest. You were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent from the beginning. Only if necessary, Lucas said quickly. Only if you refuse to let us help you. Help me what, Lucas? My voice cracked like a whip. Help me give you my money? The truth hung in the air between us like smoke. My son, the little boy I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for, had been planning to erase my independence and steal my life's work. There's one more thing, I said quietly. Lucas looked up, almost hopeful. Yes? The papers you signed today. The power of attorney I gave you. Yes? They're fake. His head snapped up. What? David prepared them specially for this meeting. They give you power of attorney over a bank account that contains exactly $1. Lucas stared at me in shock. What? My real money is safely protected in trusts you can't touch. The will you're so worried about leaves you a modest annual income and nothing more. And if you're convicted of conspiracy and Evelyn's murder plot, even that goes away. Lucas's face crumpled. You've destroyed my life. No, Lucas. My voice was calm, final. You destroyed your own life. I just made sure you couldn't destroy mine in the process. As I watched my son sit there in ruins, shoulders shaking, I felt something I hadn't expected, not triumph, not rage. Something quieter. Something that felt a little like grief. Good news, David said, settling into my living room, his briefcase balanced on his knees. I poured him coffee and waited. After months of lawyers, court hearings, and paperwork, I'd learned to let other people get to the point. It's about the trusts, he said finally. Everything we put into place held up exactly as designed. Michael's creditors can't touch a penny. Jessica's attorneys tried to subpoena your accounts for restitution denied. And the Sunset Manor contract? Since you never actually moved in, the facility had no claim on your deposits. I exhaled slowly. So it's really over. David smiled. It's over. You're safe, your assets are safe, and Emma's college fund is secure. You've done everything right. I looked out the window at the roses climbing the trellis. Their petals heavy with rain from the night before. Safe. The word felt strange now. Almost foreign. I didn't win, David, I said softly. I survived. There's a difference. He regarded me for a long moment. Maybe, but survival with your freedom intact is still a victory. I thought about Michael, 3 months into a 3-year sentence. About Jessica staring at 15 long years behind bars. About Emma, a child caught between shame and love. About Helen, turning our pain into a warning for other families. The garden smelled of damp earth and new beginnings. Tell me again about Emma's trust, I said at last. A small smile tugging at my mouth. David opened his briefcase. It's fully funded. She never need to borrow for college. And when she turns 25, she inherit a small stake in your company shares enough to build something of her own. I closed my eyes, letting the information settle. My legacy wouldn't be a fortune someone could try to steal. It would be a chance for someone who hadn't yet been corrupted to do better. Outside, a breeze moved through the roses, scattering petals across the lawn like confetti. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe all the way down to my bones. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't vindication. But it was peace. The insurance company has decided not to contest Jessica's policy on my life. Since she was convicted of attempted murder, they're voiding the policy and returning all premiums. That's something, I suppose. There's more. Michael's creditors are seizing all his assets to cover his debts, including the house I helped them buy. David asked if I wanted to make an offer. I thought about that granite countertopped, cathedral ceiling dream home, all the things they'd wanted desperately. No, I said. Let someone else have it. Someone who can afford it honestly. David nodded and pulled out one last document. The final piece. My trust restructuring is complete. My money is now protected in perpetuity. No one can access it without my explicit written consent. And if anyone ever tries to declare me incompetent, the trust automatically transfers to charity. Thank you, David, I said, my voice soft but steady. For everything. After he left, I poured a glass of wine and settled on my deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. At 70, I'd learned that money can reveal the best and worst in people. Unfortunately, it had revealed the worst in my own family. But I learned something else too. I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for. Smart enough to see through their schemes, tough enough to stop them, and resilient enough to build a new life without them. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Grandma, I got accepted to Northwestern Pre-Law, just like you suggested. Can't wait to tell you all about it when I visit. I smiled, typing back, Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Maybe that was the real victory, not stopping Michael and Jessica's scheme, but ensuring the next generation would have a chance to choose better. Emma would grow up knowing that money is a tool, not a goal. That family is meant for support and love, not exploitation and greed. And for the first time in months, I let myself breathe, watching the sun dip below the horizon, feeling the quiet thrill of a life reclaimed.